My name is Dr. Nikki Cooley, and I would like to introduce you to Lecture 1, An Introduction to Plant Physiology. This lecture is part of the subject Plant Physiology, which is a component of the Bachelor of Agriculture and Technology, a degree that is offered in partnership with Melbourne Polytechnic and La Trobe University. Please visit our website for further information on this subject and other courses that we offer at www.melbournepolytechnic.edu.au. This subject will be delivered by Dr. Silvana Iconi and myself, Dr. Nikki Cooley. In this lecture, we are going to overview why you should study plant physiology in your degree. What is plant physiology? How will this subject be taught? The learning objectives of this subject. Overview recommended reading. Talk about the assessments and a subject checklist. So why should you study plant physiology? Well, all agricultural systems are underpinned by plants. Whether this is directly by the growing of a crop or indirectly by the use of the animal fish feed, they are essential to this enterprise. In theory, in order to optimize your commercial outputs, say for the best wine or beef production, understanding how a plant grows and develops will significantly contribute to your agriculture endeavors. This subject aims to explore the fascinating and complex world of plants, and to give you an in-depth understanding of how plants grow and develop. The content of this subject is evidence-based, where knowledge has been gained through research and experimentation. So how are you going to study for this subject? Well, you'll use Moodle, or the Student Learning System. You will start with this lecture and work your way down in the specified order. Once you have completed each lecture, a quiz will follow. We strongly advise you to undertake these quizzes, as it will enable you to review the information. We have observed in the past that students who tend to pass the subject, or do well, use the provided quizzes as a learning aid. Where complex theories or themes are presented in this subject, some lectures will contain links to short videos. Past students have said how useful they find this in improving their understanding. Each lecture will be accommodated with a handout, a list of links, and selected reading. Readings that are essential will be highlighted. Each topic that you are learning about will be accompanied by a tutorial and/or a flipped classroom activity. With the flipped classroom activities, it is best to watch the first lecture and then participate in the tutorial, or watch the pre-recorded tutorial if you're not able to make this. Many of the concepts of plant physiology will be explored by experimentation. There are two sets of experimentation, a 2-day workshop and a do-it-yourself or DIY format. The DIY format is a set of experiments you will conduct, and you will be provided with the DIY kit to enable this. Plant physiology has a wide scope of contents and can cross other disciplines. As a result, there are many definitions to this discipline. For the purpose of this subject, we will use the Tays and Zeiger definition that plant physiology is the study of function encompassing the dynamic process of growth, metabolism, and reproduction in living plants. A plant is a living organism typically growing in a permanent site. It absorbs water and inorganic substances through its roots and synthesizing nutrients in its leaves by photosynthesis using the green pigment chlorophyll. This is the Oxford Dictionary 2013 definition. There are many examples of plants, and they include trees, shrubs, herbs, grasses, ferns and mosses. So let us start with the basic structure of a plant. The image on the slide identifies many of the basic plant organs, although many of you will be aware of these already. Let's start with the roots. The roots contain both primary and lateral roots, and when they are examined in detail you will find that they contain root caps, root hairs and root tips. Then this leads to the vascular tissues. They are located in the stem. They are made of two structures, the xylem and the phloem. These are the transport mechanisms of the plant. These lead to the leaves, where the important process of photosynthesis occurs. You will also observe the reproduction organs, flowers, and fruit structures that are also depicted on this image. Now that you have a basic idea of the plant structure, you are ready to do the DIY practical workbook. There is an exercise in this workbook that familiarizes you with plants and anatomy. I hope that you will find some time to look over this after you have watched this lecture. Also, you will need to complete the DIY kit to undertake some of the exercises which enable you to look at a fine microscopic level of the plant's basic organs. To complete your studies, there is a number of articles you are required to read. You can find these on Moodle. You will note article number 2 is from the Tays and Zeiger recommended textbook. This is based on chapter 1, Plant and Cell Architecture, which in the 2010 issue is in chapter 1. If you have earlier or later issues, you may have to look at different chapters. To add depth to your knowledge in this topic, the following article is suggested. This can be found via the link in Moodle. The theory in this subject will be taught via 2 journeys. The first stage of your journey will be to take an adventure through the plant. This will be a hypothetical journey as if you were a molecule of water. The second stage will be to investigate whole growth and development components, plant defense and nutrition. So let us look at stage 1 in some detail. First of all, you've had an introduction to what plant physiology is. In Lecture 2, we will look at root structure and function. We will hypothesize that there is a water molecule entering the root, and you will learn about the structure and how this is enabled. This will be followed by a lecture on nutrient uptake. Lecture 4 will introduce you to the xylem. In Lecture 5, you will learn about the stomata. Lecture 6 will introduce you to transpiration, the movement of water through the plant. In Lecture 7, we will deal with the topic of photosynthesis. We will break this up into 2 components and start with the light requiring action. This will be followed by Lecture 8, where the non-light requiring reaction or carbon reactions occur in photosynthesis. In Lecture 9, we will overview the phloem, and this will be followed by Lecture 10 on carbohydrate partitioning. This brings us to stage 2 of your theoretical journey through a plant. In this stage, we will look at whole plant components. Lecture 11, we will look at plant growth and development. 12, plant nutrition. 13 will cover plant signals. And finally, Lecture 14 will be an overview using climate change adaptation as a way of demonstrating the new theories that you have learnt. This will also act as a review lecture for your examinations. There are 5 intended learning outcomes for this subject. These are to investigate and describe how plants function and identify the ways in which environmental factors can influence plant growth and physiology. Describe and explain the basic terminology of plant morphology, taxonomy and physiology. Apply physiological processes of plant growth to plant management for a selected crop, pasture or vineyard. Describe crop and or vine production systems and the components of associated production. And finally, intended learning outcome number 5, produce and present nutritional management plans using language suitable for a professional audience. It is very important that you obtain a laboratory coat and bring it along to the workshop. Without this, you will not be allowed in the workshop and will not be able to complete the tasks required for the assessment. Safety glasses will be provided. Please bring pens and pencils and an exercise book, a fine tip permanent marker. Ensure your hair is tied back and that you have closed shoes on, a calculator, and ideally access to the internet to enable you to access Moodle while you are in the workshop. The prescribed textbook for this subject is the Tays and Zeiger Plant Physiology. We ideally stipulate edition 5, but early editions can be used. There are copies in the library, or you may be able to access them via certain links. To help with your overall understanding of plant physiology, we recommend that you look at a suite of literature. The ones on the slide are not necessarily articles or books that you must read, but they will help you understand some of the basic concepts if you are struggling. So how many hours of study does this subject require? Well, you need to set aside about 13 hours of study per week over the 12-week semester. Time management is essential for this subject. During these 13 hours, many of them will be unscheduled. That is, you will undertake the activities in your own time when it is convenient for you to do so. The unscheduled activities include watch lectures, conduct DIY practicals, complete the associated Moodle quizzes. You can attend the online flipped classrooms that will be in the evenings. You may also read the literature recommended for each topic in your unscheduled times. For some students, this subject will be challenging. It is therefore recommended that in order to pass, you watch all the lectures along with the guided timelines. You complete all the quizzes and review and repeat where required, and undertake all of the practical activities and associated readings. Past students have suggested that planning their time was very useful. Please ensure that you complete lectures 1 to 10 within the first 6 weeks or so of study before you undertake the practical sessions. If you are to undertake this subject along with vintage or industry placement, please ensure that you timetable quite a lot of time when you get back to catch up. This subject has been designed for students to catch up, but it does assume that they will be able to spend some time before the practical sessions catching up. Please contact the subject coordinator or lecturers if you have any questions about this. So how is plant physiology subject assessed? Well, there are 3 assessment components: laboratory reports, a physiological management plan, and a written exam. The written exam will contribute 40%. The plant physiological management plan will contribute 30%, and a theoretical crop will need to be selected. Please speak to the subject coordinator for details about this. There will be 2 laboratory reports or booklets required. These are worth in total 30%. The first component will be a DIY electronic laboratory practical book that will need to be completed and submitted in week 13. The second assessment is a practical workshop book. This will be completed in the workshops that are being conducted on Thursday the 10th of May and Friday the 11th of May. In order to help you pass the assessments, it is worth your time reading through the assessment rubric, also called assessment matrix. For each assessment there is a rubric supplied in this subject. This rubric is a descriptive scoring or marking scheme. Feedback for the quizzes are given as soon as they are completed. Look at the questions you got wrong or did not know and reverse that part of the lecture to relate to it. Also, you may increase your reading around this area. It is recommended that students repeat the quiz until they get 80% or more. The marked practical reports and plant physiological management plan assessments will be returned within a few weeks of hand-in date. If the practical assessment or management plan assessment is handed in late or an extension is given, the report and feedback may be delayed. The Plant Physiological Management Plan forms 30% in Assessment 1 of this subject. The deadline for this is in week 10. The details of this assessment are on Moodle. You need to be assigned a theoretical crop. This can be undertaken by contacting the subject coordinator. Please note you will get approval via an email to lock in your selected theoretical crop, so don't start this assignment until that has come. Selection will be based on first-come basis, and there is a list in your student subject outline of all the crops that can be considered. If a student does not volunteer a crop, one will be provided for the student early on in the subject. Laboratory reports are worth 30% and they are made of two components. Part 1 is the DIY or do-it-yourself electronic plaque book, which is based on the DIY practicals, and Part 2 is the workshop notebook that comes from the workshop experimental activities. There is an examination that for this subject is an exam, and it is worth 40%. A copy of the past exam will be posted on Moodle for you to practice. A revision session will be incorporated at the end of the photosynthesis workshop on the 24th of May, which will be conducted at the Epping campus on the 24th of May. Therefore, attendance at this is recommended. Assistance can be found for this subject via tutorials, flipped classrooms and workshops, by making a time with one of your lecturers, or by email. Lecture notes will be available in PDF form from the Moodle. There is a document Why Study Plant Physiology in Moodle. Please download this and overview it, as it gives written instructions of how to study this subject. For this subject, you will need access to Moodle. You will need a DIY practical, seeds and plants, and booklets. There is a review document called Why Study Plant Physiology. Please read this before undertaking this subject. Make sure you have ticked off the following: Lectures 1 to 14, Tutorials 1 to 13 or flipped classrooms, 2-day workshops, the DIY practicals, and completed the quizzes. In order to successfully complete this subject, there will be a number of things that you will need. Predominantly, you will need access to Moodle, the learning systems, and the Internet. If you do not have easy access to the Internet at home, please seek access at the nearest library. You will be provided with plants and seeds in a container, slow-release fertilizer. You will have to provide tap water yourselves. You will be given DIY microscopes and microscope slides, and other components that are necessary for you to undertake and complete the DIY practical. You will be supplied with a DIY practical manual and a DIY electronic template. You will undertake the activities and instructions in the DIY practical manual and place the answers in the DIY electronic practical report, where you will be able to email them. If you have any problems with emailing these, please convert to a PDF and then email. Workshop 1 is based on practicals. This will be conducted on Thursday the 10th and Friday the 11th of May at the Epping campus. You will be supplied with a booklet as part of the Plant Physiology Practical Workshop. You will complete this booklet and then hand this in, which forms part of the practical assessments. Workshop 2 on photosynthesis will be conducted at the Epping campus on the 24th of May. This is an intensive learning modelling exercise to help students understand the complexity of photosynthesis. Students will work in a group for this activity. This will be followed by a revision session to enable students to prepare for the examination. So to conclude, the theory that you learn in this subject can be applied to all commercial plant production. We hope that this will be aimed predominantly at agronomists and vineyard managers and be applicable to winemakers, where you will be able to understand the complexity of a plant physiology so that you can then optimize commercial wine production.